Hi, my name is Jim Devlin, and we are walking through our game On the Road to Jericho, which was built for the Old Testament course. This game appears at the end of the fourth lesson and is a summative assessment between the third and fourth lessons, the content learned. And the game challenge is to, as we walk through, we're traveling with the nation of Israel as they leave Egypt and slavery behind and walk to the promised land. There are six challenges throughout, and the goal of the challenges is that you have to gather stones for the correct answers. If we have 12 stones by the time we get to the end of our journey in the promise outside of Jericho in the promised land, we can build an altar just like the Israelites did thousands of years ago. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll click next. This course rather, was built on using the multiple intelligences theory. So what we'll see is there's a variety of different assessment styles and learning styles being incorporated throughout. As we're getting started, we're looking at four different characters that we can choose to be our guides, if you will. We talk about the 12 nations of Israel, and those 12 nations were named after the sons of Jacob. Uh, and these are four of his sons: Reuben, who was the firstborn; Judah, and with each time we'll have a short little story about them, as well as the blessing, which comes directly from the Bible, given by their father when he was on his deathbed. So we'll choose Benjamin. Let's play Benjamin today. Sorry. On to the next. Now we choose one of our people, and Benjamin will be our guide. So I mentioned we have six challenges throughout, and these tie into the journey through the desert and the wilderness, as well as talking about covenants, which are promises that were made between God and humanity throughout the Old Testament. Our first challenge is we're looking for water. Within 3 days of leaving Egypt, the Israelites were running out of water. Dying in the desert, they were kind of concerned, so they thought they should find some water. Excuse me. They cried out to Moses, who took their complaint to God, and God did provide them. But we first ask, how long can you last without water? Research shows that on the average, you can last 3 days without water. And once we submit, we'll get our answer. Had we chosen a wrong answer, it would remind us that no, that's not correct. You do have 3 days. So just a short little follow-up talking about God providing. So the interesting thing of the game and the course is this is something that's being used not only in school religion classes, but also in parish faith formation programs. So it's not just a game to play. We're trying to find ways that we can tie the theme of the game, the themes of the game rather, into the students' lives. And so we'll have opportunities throughout. In this case, we're talking about God providing the water. Well, what has God provided you in your life? And this will give the children a chance to enter a short response. And I did mention that our scoring tabs were not working properly here, unfortunately, but we see that we did pass. It's not showing us that we gathered any stones here. So that was 3 days after the Israelites left Egypt. They were complaining of water. Now we're about a week in, and they're starting to complain about food. So the first question is, we have no food and need to find some fast. What would you do if you were with the Israelites? Well, reading the story, we know that the Israelites did nothing but complain to Moses. They never really reached out to God. So what would we do if we chose hunt for food? And so we've missed our question. Following through, telling the story of manna in the morning and meat at night that God promised. Manna, which loosely translated from early Hebrew is what is it? And this just tells that story, reaffirms what we learned in our lesson. Talk about the quail that was provided every night. And now, again, trying to tie this into our students' lives, one of our three major prayers talks about our daily bread, and we want the students to figure which one that is. They can click on these blocks and read through the prayers. Oh, give us this day our daily bread. So then they know the correct answer is our Father. Again, a free response question. If I need a hint to figure things out on my own, I have it there and I can type in my answer. A little generous on the stones for this one. As we continue to move through the desert, walking towards Jericho, the next step that we come to is Mount Sinai and the Ten Commandments. And these are covered in the lesson, but we're going to break them down. The first three commandments talk about our relationship with God. The last seven commandments talk about our relationships with each other. So in this case, we're going to put our three commandments in order just by clicking and dragging. Oops. And here we're tying it into our lives. So we're looking at, the task is rather to look at these seven commandments and choose three that we could rewrite for our life. And we talk about this little in the lesson, giving the students some ideas, such as you shall not, number 8, you shall not bear false witness. That could be related to something if I'm gossiping about somebody at school, if I'm bullying someone online or telling stories about people online, which makes it much more relevant to think of it in those terms for the students. Sorry, I forgot to type in my answer. I mentioned the covenants earlier, so we're talking about here relating the story to sitting around the fires. And at this point, not many people were educated to read or write, so the faith, the lives were passed on through stories. And we'll look at our first 4 covenants that we see in the Bible, and we're asking the student to put them in order. The Adamic covenant, which relates to Adam, comes first, then Noah, then Abraham, and then Moses. Are we correct? Yes. This requires the students to think a little more deeply. These quotes are coming directly from Scripture, and they would have been taught in the class, so we're just reaffirming them. I'm going to go ahead and just get them wrong. So now I have to play again and be a little more thoughtful this time. I know that one's that. There. Our 5th challenge talks about the life of Moses. So his life is broken down into 3 different stages when we study him. The early days from his birth and abandonment in the river by his mother, and being found by the Egyptian princess, through 40 years later when he killed an Egyptian soldier and was running for his life. Then we move through his exile and return, again, a stage of 40 years. And then finally in the desert as we're moving from Egypt in freedom to the promised land. I can click on any of these and get a short story if I needed to read up. Different images, different types of images, so we try to keep the course engaging, pulling in a variety of different art styles. So here we have to enter in how old Moses was, and we have to get within 20 years to get the point. So even if we don't know it exactly, when we submit our answer rather, it will tell us that Moses was 120 when he died, and breaking it down into those 3 stages as we mentioned. This activity is a little bit more in depth. It's a click and drag, drag and drop rather. I have to go ahead and put them in. If I choose one and drag it to the wrong place, it turns red, so I know I need to move it over. Oops, sorry. So I can't submit them till they're all correct. Our fifth and final challenge, the Israelites have walked for 40 years, and when we read, excuse me, in the lesson, we explain why that is, why it did take 40 years. But this last challenge was a great challenge, actually. The Jordan River was flooded at that point. They were coming up to it in the spring. So it's typically approximately 100 feet wide and about 10 foot deep. And according to the Bible, it was wider than that and deeper than that because of the flood. So how did we cross the river? The story will go through and explain. And one of the did you knows as we go, we'll see these did you knows throughout. Excuse me. Noting that the point where they crossed the Jordan River was where Jesus would later be baptized 1400 years later. I read through those, and now I come up to my final challenge. And these are different events that happened on the journey. On the shores of Jericho, on the shore of the Jordan River, near Jericho, rather, this is where the Israelites built their altar, as I mentioned earlier. The path from the desert. Moses died along the way, shortly before reaching the promised land. The middle of the river bottom, this is where we gathered our 12 stones from to build that altar. And the Jordan River, this is also where Jesus was baptized. And our final results screen, it should be telling us how many stones we actually did earn. It's reminding us that we needed 12 stones, and it's telling us that we have enough to build our altar. Thank you for playing.